Shalom, this is Dr. Jay Rawlings, and this week's Fact or Fantasy, I want to continue on our historical analysis of what is true and what is false in the Jewish connection to the land of promise, to Israel. Enemies of Israel would say that the Jews have never had any historical connection to the land. In fact, some extremist Muslim preachers and imams publicly have declared that the Jews never had any relation to the land, never had a temple, never had a religious presence in Palestine. The fact of the matter is that at the end of the 18th century, increasing numbers of Jews began to have a yearning to return to the land of promise. Many were religious Jews, but others were secular. And by 1844, the majority of the population of Jerusalem was Jewish. Then anti-Semitism and modern nationalism in Europe both accelerated this return. And the influx of Jews, religious and non-religious, came in what we call waves of aliyah or ingathering. The first wave occurred during the 1880s and 90s, and then a second wave in 1903 following the Kishinev massacres in Russia, while a third wave occurred in the 1920s and 30s. Then, of course, in 1945 to 48, in the years following the Nazi Holocaust, came a huge wave of immigration. And going back to the 19th century for a moment, the vision of the return of the Jews broadened out to embrace various non-traditionalist strands of Jewish thinking. Socialist Jews saw a revived Jewish nation as a way to end Jewish persecution and to enable Jews to be economically productive in an equal society and to contribute to the betterment of humanity as a whole. The Israeli kibbutz is a unique social experiment which resulted from this very vision. Then assimilated Jews, guided by Theodor Herzl, viewed the prospect of the return to Zion as a cure for anti-Semitism and a way for Jewish people to become a normal nation who could fashion their future like any other nation. Now, in the 1930s, political right-wing Jews, whose guiding influence was Zev Jabotinsky, viewed the return to Israel as a way to restore Jewish dignity and to enable Jewish people to defend themselves. Religious Jews, meanwhile, saw the return to Zion as a way to fulfill the ancient biblical vision and to restore Jewish nationhood in sort of a messianic way. And it had existed in their hearts from the time of the Jewish temples in Jerusalem. But each of these groups had passionate followers, dissenters, and critics. Some of the great followers of Zev Jabotinsky was, for example, people like Menachem Begin. And together they expressed their varied ways of a different Jewish vision of Israel. But all together they comprised the modern Zionist movement. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, led by David Ben-Gurion, then marked the culmination, in a certain way, of this movement. So the connection between the Jewish people and the land, fragile as it was for nearly 2,000 years, has been restored in these last 57 years since the Declaration of Independence in 1948. Israel has sought to have that connection recognized as legitimate by the Palestinian people and by the Arab world as a whole, and to achieve a secure and just peace with them. Next week, we want to talk about some of the challenges the Jewish people face in Israel today. Shalom from Jerusalem.